How do we write something that gets people invested immediately? Because when we write, one of the things you can think about is your very first line. It's your entryway. It's your vehicle. Now, these are paragraphs written from research articles and like newspaper articles and things like that. When you're writing a poem, you don't have that luxury. You're not writing, in general, 1,000 words. My apologies if you're writing the next great epic poem, but most of you probably are not doing that. So our space is a lot more condensed. So we don't get, a whole paragraph hook. A lot of times our hook is the very first line. How many people in here, just curious, are interested in publishing? Anyone here interested in publishing? Deborah's like, yes. I asked Deborah earlier, she's a poet. She's like, I don't know. And now she's like, but I do want to get published. Okay, I appreciate that. It's going to be your own audience. That's okay. Just be honest. Some people say they're their own audience, and then when they read their poem and no one likes it, they're really sad. And it's like, you shouldn't be sad. You're your own audience, right? Maybe. Well, if you're ever thinking about presenting your work or things like that, the hook is just like first time you're saying hi to someone. You only get one shot at a first intro. The hook is also the place where you could think of a poem. First, I forget whose metaphor I'm stealing this from, but you can think of a poem as stepping into a boat. You ain't never been on this boat. You have no idea this boat's going to hold up your weight. You have no idea this boat's going to sink. You have no idea what this boat's about to do. You don't know if it's going to last or what's going to happen. So the first line is your key to the reader to be like, hey, no, it's safe. We can do this together. It's going to be the experience for you. Or, no, you got it. Don't read the rest of this. Get away as soon as possible. People are getting that impression just from the very first line. So I asked you guys, what are some strategies you can use for the very first line of a poem? What kind of strategies did we get?
Narrowing down to which you want to talk about.
Okay. So something that's focused and narrowed down to a specific point. Okay.
You could say something controversial.
Ooh, you went right at it. That's very controversial. Okay. Okay. Get controversial right from the start. That's fine. Other strategies?
Like once you get to a certain point, you typically find okay, maybe I was just kind of getting my ideas out right here, but this is where the poem starts, and you can typically tell because afterwards, then all of our work is it seems a little more cohesive. So being able to notice, the strongest or the line that actually pulls you in the free write process.
So you free write, maybe it's even turning into a poem, but you're going through that process with the understanding that, this poem may not actually know the direction it's heading in. So the poem you're writing isn't actually going to be the poem that it's going to become, which again also suggests that the first line for your poem is very often not the first line that you use to start writing the poem. So being open to that, just being open to that idea that, the very first line of my poem might actually be technically the last thing that I write. Because I'm just I already know what the poem is, so now I can focus on that starting line. There's a couple quick strategies that we didn't discuss right now that maybe you'll find helpful as you need to start pieces. For instance, starting with a fact or an assumption. For instance, we even saw that today in the article that we had. I mean, it is a fact, but it's not the most dramatic fact. Humans are lucky to live 100 years. I mean, that's a factual statement. Maybe you can find something that's a little bit more treat or play on that lucky aspect of it. Interesting statistics, weird, strange things that if you drop a cat out of a window from a 9th-story window, the cat will survive. If you drop it from a 5th-story window, the cat will die. So there's this weird range of I don't know. Don't ask me why I know this. But from the 4th to the 9th floor, it's it's all the cats. But that's something like that. Look, I mean, it's controversial. It's wait, what? People are oh, let's talk about it. But so starting off that way. If you're doing a poem that's a little bit more lyric based, where it's less about maybe giving a narrative, maybe it's more about just conveying a certain emotion, starting off with a line that conveys that emotion, so it kind of colors how the rest of the poem is going to be read. So kind of prepare your reader. starting with things like figurative language, opening, for instance, with a metaphor, simile. Those could be techniques that you can use as well, or comparisons. Making an initial claim or an initial conceit for the poem, especially if it's something that's a little bit weird. My poetry workshop teacher launches cats out of windows. Like, what? It's horrible. Something like that, Having like a real quick line that then is followed up by something longer. Like, for instance, there's an example of a poem by Ellen Bass talking about cutting cucumbers. She starts off saying, I like cutting the cucumbers. And then she gives a quick description of what she likes about like the sounds and the things like that. But the first initial line is super quick. I like cutting the cucumbers. And then it extends off from there. So something that's a little bit easier to enter, and then hitting them with something a little bit harder after that. Okay, so these are all things to be considering. Just to go back on the point about weirdness, that is one thing that when you look at a lot of poems, what often separates like the really great poems, especially the ones written today, versus the ones that are just kind of good and then forgotten. Very often you want to kind of lean into the strangeness, lean into something weird. Poems usually have something that's really weird. It could be a single word, it could be a situation, but there's something just really unusual about it that draws your attention. That's something that I would encourage you to try to incorporate into your poems at some point. Now, I do have to apologize. We've gone this far into the workshop, and I haven't actually even introduced myself, and that's a mistake on me. So just a real quick introduction. Hi, I'm Jeff. It rhymes with breath because we're nice and calm. I am someone who's been writing poetry, most of my life, several decades. In terms of poetry things I've done, I've attended Kalu poetry retreats and also Cave Canem, another poetry retreat. In addition to that, my bachelor's degree was in English. I'm the founder of The Verses. The Verses is all about professional poetry development. We're trying to get people to view poetry not just as something to do on the side, but no, there are so many tools and opportunities here in 2024 that didn't even exist like 5 years ago that we can use to, if you want to make a career out of poetry, we believe it's really possible. So we're trying to help other poets realize that. It involves craft. For instance, today we're focusing on starting poems, but it also involves, you need to understand business. You need to understand how finances work. You need to understand how do you find clients? You need to understand how I make an offer that helps people. How am I helping people? Because if you're not helping people, it's hard to start a business. You have to decide how or what is the service that you're giving to others. So those are the things that we're really invested in trying to do with the verses. So one of the ways we're helping you today is we're helping you, how do you start a poem in a way that's intriguing and that gets people wanting to read the whole piece. For those of you interested, for instance, in publishing, maybe not right now, but maybe you're going to join Future Richard and you're going to get a poem published. Well, what we need to be considering is that if you're aiming for instance, traditional publishing, there's a couple places where editors are looking. They're looking at your title. Sorry, you need to write a title. They're looking at your last line because you need to finish with a punch, but they're also looking at your first line. You could have the best middle of a poem ever, but if no one gets there, why are they going to publish your poem? People have to be able to get there, which means that you have to make sure that your opening is strong enough. So our goal is try to work on techniques for doing that.